Now, Mark, you're described as one of the world's leading marketing strategists and futurists. Looking at your crystal ball, what do you see as the key trends in the future of social media?
Well, the biggest problem I think we're facing right now is that we're leading into a world of unintended consequences. When we went into the pandemic, we guessed wrong about everything, about the world, about marketing, about social media. I mean, here in America, we had shortages of lumber in a pandemic, and we thought it would be a recession, right? And coming out of the pandemic, we're going to be wrong about everything again, because I think consumers have been impacted in millions of ways, both large and small. We don't know how everything's going to play out. We don't know how habits are going to change. And that's why I call this the era of unintended consequences, because we have this complex cocktail of changes and trends and habits that are all coming together. So this is a time for marketers to be really in tune with all the subtle changes that are going to happen that could turn into major changes. It's a time to be humble. It's a time to listen. It's a time to question everything you thought about your customers and your platforms. It's time to think again. I don't look at any data that started before March of 2020. That's a reset. That's now the first data point on every chart.
Now, when we look at the era of unintended consequences, then there are obviously going to be some surprises. Could you give me an example of a surprising element of social media that perhaps we may not yet have considered?
Just the consumption habits have been really crazy. I mean, one of the things that we saw was that consumption habits were completely disrupted because people's schedules were disrupted. So most of the people I know, podcasts just took a dive, right? Because people used to listen to podcasts on their commutes. And now I think we need to see, how are those consumption patterns changing? Some of those things are going to come back. Some of them are not. Some of them are adjusting. They're listening in new ways and at new times. So again, this is a time we need to really be humble and patient and pay attention to these new changes.
So, Mark, what platforms do you believe are positioned for growth?
The way the social media platforms, they're really starting to fracture by demographics, right? So the only demographic growing on Facebook right now is 55 and over. Everybody seems to love Instagram and YouTube. Snapchat is sort of the home of 30 to 18. TikTok, generally speaking, is 18 and below. And at some point, the people below Gen Z are going to look up and say, oh, we don't want TikTok. Our big brothers and sisters use that. We need something else. So the growth is really being dictated by demographics and by geography. And I think with the ways that Facebook could be imploding, I mean, there could be some new opportunities for more specific social networks.
And, Mark, from a personal perspective, what are your favorite platforms for online communication?
First of all, I'm a blogger. I'm a blogger at heart. I've always blogged. I love podcasting. I sort of like Instagram as far as the general media, because I somehow people give these little glimpses into their lives that I think is very charming.
Absolutely. Very engaging and authentic. So, do you believe social media regulation should be the responsibility of platforms, governments, or users?
Companies can't regulate themselves. We've seen that over and over through history. The beginning of marketing and advertising was a debacle because advertising just became lies. This would be in the 1920s, 1930s. And that's how we got regulatory agencies in the first place, because companies could not monitor themselves. And we're seeing the same pattern happen today. There's no other solution. It has to be regulated by the government, and it will be regulated by the government.